All right. Well, I think we can get started. I'll continue to let folks in throughout. So my name is Sue Atkins. I'm the Associate Director of Employer Relations here in the Career Center at Tufts University. And we're hosting a special guest today. It's for our tech recruitment update. And we're happy to have Risa Kahn with us, who's a Tufts alum. She is the recruiting manager at NDT. She works with a lot of the tech roles, but also tech business roles, mostly throughout New England, but the country as well. So we're excited to have her with us today. And just some housekeeping things that I mentioned to many of you earlier. We will be using the chat function for all of our questions today, and we'll be recording the session. So, and I've listed Risa's contact information in the chat box as well. So if you'd like to connect with her following this session through LinkedIn, you'll be able to see that in the chat box as well. But without any further ado, I'd love to introduce Risa Kahn, who's a jumbo, and she can share more about her background at Tufts, the things she got involved in, a little bit more about her career trajectory of how you get to recruitment. Having been a recruiter, I know it's not always a straight shot going from many roles into the recruitment space. So learning a little bit more about that, and then we'll launch into some kind of questions that we've outlined for today that hopefully will be helpful to all of you. So thanks for joining us. And I'll turn it over to Risa to give a little bit more context about your time at Tufts.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Sue, for inviting me to speak to Tufts students and alum today. And I'm very excited to be able to share the real-time information about what's happening in the tech market. But to begin, I just wanted to quickly go over the plan for our time today. Thanks to Sue, I had some good insight into the types of topics that may be useful for all of you. So what I'd like to do in about 20 minutes of time or so, and then followed by questions, are cover the following topics. First of all, I will begin by giving you some of my background, followed by a tech update in New England and across the country. Then I'll talk about what are some of the main changes to the industry due to COVID-19. What are some of the main changes to the industry? How does a Tufts graduate stand out to organizations that we present your background to? What are some of the common mistakes to avoid as you're going through the interview and hiring process? And what are some of the best practices that I've seen over time to lead to your success, not just today, but throughout your career? So to begin, I'd like to tell you about my present role. So I am presently recruiting manager at New Dimensions in Technology. We are a boutique recruiting firm established in 1979 by my mother-in-law, who was one of the early pioneers in tech back in the 70s. So the company began by, hard to imagine, but by mailing emails to Microsoft on the West Coast and faxing. We've obviously come a long way. We have been in business, as I've said, since 1979, and I've been recruiting in this space for 20 years. So to give you a sense of how NDT can be a resource to you today and throughout your career, I'd like to give you a bit of an overview. So we are based in Boston. Our specialty since the inception of the company has been tech. And so when I say that, we are hired by technology companies, as well as large organizations such as financial services, healthcare, and manufacturing firms who are looking for people to help with technology to support their business. So we are paid by the companies, so there is no cost to you as the talent or candidate. So just to give you a sense of how you do work with a recruiter if you haven't had that opportunity to do so yet. We are hired by companies, as I've mentioned, to find talent that is developing the technology for a company. So it may be software engineering, hardware engineering, mechanical engineering talent, anywhere from a new graduate of Tufts University to all the way up to VP of engineering and CTO level. And then we also specialize, and where I tend to focus a lot of my time, is on tech business. And that's something that some of you may not have been exposed to yet. But as you move forward in your career, you may decide that with your technical foundation, you may decide to pursue the business route within a tech company. And in those roles, there's a lot of opportunity in product management, product marketing, business development, services, or what many companies call customer success right now. And there's a wealth of opportunity in anything related to data, machine learning, data science, DevOps. So the roles that we place people in are permanent. Full-time, you are employed by the company. As far as recruiting, I just wanted to step back a little bit and just give you a sense of the evolution of my career, because I think it's always helpful to see, as Sue mentioned, that it's not typically and many times not a straight line. So I began my career as a marketing major in the business school at Syracuse University. And I worked for a number of years as a market research analyst, which, looking back to the 80s, was the beginning of data analytics. So it was a direct marketing company, and I was to collect insights from the data we could collect from the catalogs that were being sent out to potential customers and customers. A number of years forward, I decided to pursue my master's degree in occupational therapy at Tufts University. So it was an exceptional program for people that were at a stage in their career where they were changing careers. So they had worked for a piece of time in another profession and were changing over. So I did not have a science background at the time. I pursued this program as my primary focus and took all of the prerequisites in science, and then pursued the 2 years master's program at Tufts. My experience at Tufts as a graduate student, I was 30 years old. So to me, that was a long time out of college as a full-time student. I absolutely loved Tufts. The professors were exceptional. We were really very much like a small, close-knit family of, I believe, 58 people in the program. And I left my full-time job, started at Tufts full-time. And when I graduated, I was fortunate enough to work for a number of years in the rehab area. I worked for New England Rehab Hospital and then for New England Baptist with orthopedic as well as with stroke patients. So as my career progressed, I started off with a marketing degree. I worked in OT, so more of a therapeutic environment, hospital environment. And then recruiting is often a career that you grow into. It's not something you typically take as a major in school. And when I met my husband, I was in awe of his mother, who started New Dimensions in Technology in 1979, long before women, for the most part, were in tech. So a very impressive company founder and leader who's still very active to this day. And I joined a very large international recruiting company in Boston, thinking that this is something I think I would really enjoy, while I was also working as a therapist in a hospital environment on weekends. And recruiting, I found, was a natural. So I found, again, not having a direct path, With my marketing background, I'm very well equipped to market backgrounds of the talent that I meet with and spend a lot of time with. My background from Tufts as a therapist is invaluable as I listen to people. I care about people. I am not looking just to send a resume onto a client company. I know you. And I also, we as a company have generations of people that we worked with for years. So we may have worked with somebody who's of my generation that graduated Tufts. And now we're starting to work with their offspring. So working with people just out of school that are the next generation of technologists. So I love what I do. I believe if you've chosen technology as your area of interest and passion, that it will serve you well. Because if you love to learn and you love to always be adapting and changing, that's perfect to be in tech. So to start off with, I wanted to give you, or let me pause there. Is there a specific question now, Sue? Okay, we're fine. Okay. So our ability is to be able to give you real-time data of what's happening in the market, meaning now, today, this week. So rather than reading reports, I can tell you exactly what's happening here in Boston. So if I look back to this time last year, tech was booming. A lot of hiring was being done in January and February of 2020. Obviously, as of March, things came to a halt. And then I would say March through June, we saw a pause in the market with some hiring as companies were learning to adjust to a fully remote environment. And then beginning in July, I would say the floodgates opened up. We have been busy from July going forward. So I know you tend to see in the news a lot of reports on high unemployment, and there may be in certain pockets of the tech industry, anything related to travel, for example, hospitality. There were a lot of layoffs, but otherwise, the majority of people that I'm working with are employed. So in July, we started to see the results of pent-up demand for software development and hardware development talent. Beginning in September, we've seen a lot of demand as well for tech business roles, product management, product marketing, a wealth of opportunity in data science, machine learning, and DevOps. And so when I say that from a recruiting standpoint, we have lots of companies that have asked us to fill these roles. And most of the people, again, if they're not just out of school, are employed. And I think a lot of people in this market have been accustomed to and have become comfortable with working remotely, and many thinking that they'll stay where they are for now until, we can see a clearer path through this pandemic.
I had a question just to follow up from that. I mean, obviously these roles span skill sets, right? And skill areas. Are you seeing any themes or common elements in the roles that people are hiring for across the tech industry right now?
Yeah, great question. So absolutely. So Sue had mentioned that the majority of our clients are in New England, but we do have in Boston. We do have clusters in New York City and obviously on the West Coast, given what we do and given that we've been in business for over 40 years, a lot of people that are our candidates now become our clients, and then our clients become our candidates. So as far as themes, in Boston area, I can speak, very clearly in real time about there's tremendous demand in healthcare tech, and that covers a very broad range. The majority of the companies having some type of healthcare data offering. So that may be for physician practices, hospitals, insurers, and also now with a lot of the changes in the HIPAA guidelines, some interesting technologies that are being developed as it relates to the patient, to the consumer. So a consumer, for example, might be able to access data from multiple healthcare providers that they've seen over time, rather than, say, for example, you're part of the Partners Hospital Network in Boston, which is the large majority of the hospitals, and maybe Leahy, for example. You may have access to all of your data. You can share it with doctors, and insurance companies can provide or take the data and develop insights from it. So there's some really interesting, exciting healthcare tech offerings. And I can tell you, coming from healthcare, which always has been a little bit behind the curve, as far as technology, it's very exciting. So that's a huge opportunity, new frontier of positions. I would also say in the fintech space. So when I mentioned that, anything related to technology for banking, for investment companies, so personal banking, commercial banking globally, insurance tech is tremendous. So I think some businesses have just grown in this during this pandemic. So insurance, for example, a lot of people choose to compare rates online now rather than meet with somebody in person. And that looks to be the way that the next generation of consumers for insurance are going. As far as other areas, we have tech clients right now that are targeting small businesses and helping them to access money for PPP. So they are booming in this market. We have other companies that are working with global banks, and they're able to assist them to increase efficiency and decrease cost, and also increase speed in transactions. So that's a tremendous growth area, I believe, overall, but in Boston especially. And then EdTech. So we've enjoyed working with a number of new EdTech clients in this market. One of them that is offering an online proctoring service, which again, they're at the right place at the right time for what's happening in the world since everything's gone virtual. There's proctoring done for test taking, whether it be standardized test taking, for college test taking, for high school test taking. So those are huge areas of need. We've also seen an expansion in need for hardware engineers and mechanical engineers, as we see a lot of growth in medical device development, especially here in Boston, and as well as robotics. And robotics, for example, for there was a company called Kiva in Boston that was acquired by Amazon. And so that's robotics for warehouses. So when you think of everything related to what's going on now and supply chain challenges through the pandemic, this all comes into play. The other area, obviously, of growth is pharmaceuticals. And again, as that relates to supply chain, so supply and distribution. So those are all areas of tremendous need right now.
Would you say there's a particular skill set or software or something that if you were going to give advice to either an entry level, right, someone who's about to graduate, our seniors, of course, that are looking for jobs right now, and our seasoned candidates, would you say there were kind of skill sets that you would say are sought after and something that they would need kind of day one, or something that they should take advantage of while they're still in school right now to learn to be the most marketable?
So the way that companies hire, some are technically agnostic and they are more focused, and here's your advantage as a Tufts student and being in Boston, if you happen to decide to look here. We find that our tech clients are very partial to academic excellence. So as a new grad, I suggest if you have a very impressive GPA that you put that on your resume. Tufts speaks for itself as far as reputation. People that are out there working at companies in Boston that are also Tufts grads. So it's a valuable piece of your network. And, while I'm mentioning that, I just want to say that, every contact that you have is a piece of your network that you grow and work with over time, NDT also being that, but also your Tufts alum network is something that you should, reach out over time as needed, but also, plan to be that person that also is open to others reaching out to you. As far as technologies, Python development, almost every company that we're working with right now is looking for Python development skills, any skills related to DevOps, anything related to cloud technology. On the hardware side, if you have experience with robotics, that's a really separate camp. So we have medical device companies and some robotics companies looking for C++ development. But I can tell you that Python development, Java development come up the most often. Most clients are looking for full stack developers rather than just front end or back end. So it makes you more marketable. You may have a strength in back end, but if you have that ability to be flexible, it makes you very marketable. And the majority of companies in Boston are not the Amazons, are not the Microsoft, are not the Facebook. Not that they don't have offices here, because they do. But most companies here are under 10 employees, or what we see most often, 20 to 200 employees. So when they're looking to you, every hire is a high impact, high visibility role that you would be in. So if you have internships that show that you've had some experience, for example, in healthcare tech, fintech, ed tech, you've started working in Python, whether it be on your own side projects or through an internship. Those are all valuable pieces as a new grad, where you can only have so many years of experience. If you have internship experience, sometimes that's somewhat of the hook that gets you in the door.
And just one I've got some questions that are in the mix right now, but just to clarify, NDT really does focus on all industries, is that correct?
Yes.
And you work obviously primarily in New England and kind of the Northeast, with obviously connections on the West Coast based on technology as well. And so I just wanted to make sure I was clarifying the scope of NDT's kind of reach and clientele that you work with specifically.
So that's a good question, because in New York City, I would say it's primarily very specific investment / tech companies. So those are our clients in New York City. On the West Coast, we do have clusters in the Bay Area and Seattle related to healthcare tech. But I would say, and what's happening now due to COVID, a lot of it's become remote. So Boston's been resistant for years to have people work fully remote, where I have clients on the West Coast that are hiring Boston-based people to work for them on the West Coast. But I think what we will see as a result of the pandemic, companies are primarily working remote right now in Boston. Some have reopened their offices if people choose to come in. And I think when this all evolves, and say, for example, we look up in the fall of 2021, we're likely to see a mix of, if you'd like to come into the office, we have it, and maybe we'd like to see you come in 2 to 3 days a week, but otherwise we're flexible. We've seen that this has been successful to work virtually. So I think, if anything, it'll help people in Boston. People were getting very tired of the commutes into the city if they lived outside, and companies have been moving their offices into Boston or Cambridge so that Tufts grads, for example, that are living in and around the city can walk or take their bike. So I think it's to your advantage for anybody looking this year that companies will have more flexibility.
And are you seeing other kind of trends as a result of COVID other than kind of the remote work transition, right? Versus the, um, you know, basically going in and commuting like we were used to, and now most people are from home. So are you seeing other kinds of COVID-19 things that have come about as you work with these different clients and companies?
Definitely. So if I were to talk about the market real time today, I'd say 90% of every role that we're recruiting for is new. So that's interesting. It's exciting, meaning the companies are doing phenomenally well in this market and they have to hire for a lot of positions. The challenge for people interviewing is that the roles are new. And sometimes we start off with a list, a very long list of everything under the sun that a company is looking for. And then as they interview, they realize that if they can find 80% of everything on that list, then they've really struck it rich. And that's really a more accurate view of what they should be looking for. So companies are feeling it out. I think they've been on pause mode. So we're finding we're doing a lot of educating companies. I think a lot assume that unemployment's high in tech until they start to look. And we also share with them that over 90% of the people we're working with are employed if they're, further on in their career. So that we've seen, we need to educate as well as on salary. So I think some companies don't know at the beginning exactly what they should be offering until they go through the process. So my advice to students and alum is that don't be discouraged. Companies are trying to figure it out themselves. They were somewhat in hibernation and then coming back out and looking. So they need to readjust to the market, the availability, the pace that they need to move. Some of them, if they take weeks and weeks to go through the interview process, then they're going to lose people to multiple offers. So we're seeing a lot of that adjustment. The interview process is different. So where most of the time before the pandemic, we would have seen an initial phone interview and then maybe we weren't seeing that many Zoom calls. We would have companies invite you in for a half a day interview, maybe 2 of those types of final interviews. Now the expectation is that companies are able, willing, and well equipped to hire people virtually. So people have gone through the whole process starting back in the spring, being hired virtually, and then starting work virtually and meeting the team that way. So at this point in the year, or actually just having gone through 2020, companies seem to be well equipped for that. We are seeing more pieces to the process because companies need to find ways to feel comfortable with their decision. So there's a number of technical assessments that are typically given a timeline, maybe of 48 hours or maybe a week to complete a technical assessment. If you're a software developer, if you're a product manager, you may be presented with a scenario of developing a product from inception to go to market. And you would complete that obviously at home and then present, I've seen that multiple times, to the key executives at the company. So we've seen that. And then it was mentioned to me yesterday, I had one candidate who said that she had been asked to be the facilitator of a meeting. So again, it's setting up scenarios that you can't have in person, having her have a meeting with her potential colleagues and seeing how she reacts to questions, intellectual debate, and offering her opinion overall. So that we've seen as a change. As far as, I think if there's anything else.
Have you noticed anything about graduate versus undergrad, like in terms of folks entering the market? And specifically, there's a question about breaking into robotics and whether or not, they can do that coming right out of undergrad, or is a master's degree more preferred in that space in particular?
I don't find any any companies being partial towards one or the other. we are, sad to say for all of us, having a lot of challenges with companies being able to sponsor visas this year. So we hope that that frees up, but it has been a challenge this year. It seems as though more companies are able to work with talent that needs a visa transferred. But if they're in a situation where they need to be sponsored, a lot of companies are just afraid because they're not sure, or they've had an experience that hasn't worked out this year. So we're hoping that the increase in demand again will put that pressure on, because we have some exceptional talent this year that we have had some challenges with. So we're hoping that will change as this year moves forward. Let's see. So can you hear me? Okay. So one of the other topics I wanted to touch on is, how does a Tufts graduate stand out to these organizations? So your Tufts degree alone on a resume, before they've even gotten to know you, explains that you are an exceptional student, very dedicated to your work, passionate about what you do, and have chosen a school that has a high degree of excellence in its training of its students, and all types of examples of alum that have done some wonderful things to give back to the community and the world, as well as brilliant minds that have come up with some interesting ideas that have become profitable companies. So you have that already. You put that time in of work. What can make you stand out? Again, I can't stress enough the importance of internships. And I know this has been a tough year for getting internship work, but if you're able to, it doesn't have to be with a large name brand company like Facebook. Any type of project that you can work on. Some of the smaller companies would love to have people take on a project in this market that they can't get to. Any experience is good experience. After an internship, is this something I like to do? The type of work, the type of technology that I'm working with? Is it the type of culture that I think I'm a good fit for? Is it a small company culture versus a larger, more corporate structure? So again, as far as what makes you stand out, internships, specific technologies are of interest to many companies. Some companies will ask software engineers what their setup is at home. They love to see that you're passionate about your work and like to see what you're doing on the side. What types of projects are you working on? What type of work are you doing to keep up or kind of ahead of technology? So we have some companies looking to us for certain technologies that may or may not have been taught in school, that people are teaching themselves on their own. As far as standing out in the interview process, I don't want to say that's easy, but it's really putting the time in. So the expectation when you have an interview is you've done your research. In working with NDT, we're able to tell you about who you're interviewing with for the most part, if we know them, a bit about their personality, their interview style, the culture of the company. Pre-pandemic, we've gone out to most of our client companies. I can tell you about the office, but that's changed. But I can give you, or we as a company can give you a good sense of the company. Your job is to do your research. There is no excuse at all for having not researched a company, see what's latest about them in the news, any awards that they've received. I've had companies be very impressed by people that have attempted to access any information that they could download, whether it be white papers, whether you go on as a potential customer, as a prospect, and walk through the process. What really impresses a hiring manager when you speak to them And if you have to think of their days in tech, they're so busy and they're so focused on the day to day that when somebody that's interviewing brings up something that they hadn't thought of, or they hadn't even noticed on their own website, or they hadn't received as feedback from a potential customer, that's so valuable. It shows you've done your homework, you're educated, you ask insightful questions, and you're a person that's going to bring questions to their mind. I mean, in the world of tech, people like to be intellectually challenged. So you should be prepared with questions. I have to say the feedback that we get, I'm trying to think of negative feedback, and I would say the biggest piece of negative feedback is, I don't understand how the candidate could have had no questions for me. How could you have no questions? So the expectation is that the questions show that you're prepared, but they also show that you're curious. To be in the type of work that you're in, you should be curious. As far as standing out, as we now have Zoom interviews. So you may have heard my phone ring in the background. That's what you don't want. You try, if possible, to eliminate any phone ringing, any distractions, whether it be a dog barking, whether it be a lawnmower outside, when it's nicer weather, you close the windows. And hopefully you have a good internet connection, so that's a non-issue. As far as the interview, everybody has a different style, but what you can do best to shine, if you have the opportunity, is to ask the interviewer what they're looking for. What would be their ideal profile for the role? As I mentioned before, companies are moving so fast and these roles are new. We are working with a number of company founders that don't have a job description even. They've given us a sense of the type of talent they're looking for. So if you sit down on a specific day, they might say, this is what we really need. Maybe 2 weeks ago, that isn't what they were thinking, but you're getting them in real time to tell you what they're looking for. And then you're the best one to market yourself, can market yourself accordingly as to what they're looking for. The other thing that you can do is speak, answer the question, and then do a check-in. So it shows that you're a good communicator. You can answer the question as concisely as you're able, and then check in. Say, did that answer your question? Or is there more that you'd like me to elaborate on? A lot of times companies ask very open-ended questions because they just want to see how you think. And they're not so much focused on the exact right answer, but that gives them that opportunity. The other way, again, to impress them and give a sense of your communication style is to obviously thank the interviewer as you conclude the conversation. And before you get off that call, make sure you ask, are there any remaining questions or concerns that I can answer for you? You're the best person to do it. Once the client company comes back to NDT and said, I spoke to, John from Tufts, and I don't know, I have a concern. I can follow up with you and get detail, but it's much easier if you don't raise a question that's not answered and you left somebody with a concern when you get off the call. So again, that's how you can stand out and also be the best that you can be through the process. And then always follow up with a thank you. So meaning a verbal thank you and also a thank you message. In tech, it's become customary to do that via email rather than, it is nice to get a handwritten note if you had time, but the company might be making a decision on you within the next day or so. So it's a nice way to thank someone, and it's also leaves that open correspondence when you have an email so that the hiring manager can communicate with you directly. So again, the entire process is representing you. So every piece of the process from beginning to thank you to follow up if need be, meaning checking in after 2 weeks, you haven't heard from anyone. Don't be discouraged. Sometimes people are just busy with the business of their business And many people get hired after a number of weeks. Sometimes things have been put on pause in recruiting. We have many companies come back to us a month later and say, "Oh, we met with John from Tufts. We'd like to hire him." And we're surprised. Everyone's surprised. There may have been no communication in between, but don't assume anything until you know that that position's been filled.
And so what are some of the mistakes that you've seen? So those are kind of like, right, the best practice. Obviously, no mistakes in those thank you notes, right? But anything that else that you would say would be kind of common mistakes that have risen to the table in your experience?
I think getting too comfortable. So we don't see this so much now because we're not having in-person meetings. So more so in your language, in your posture, no matter how comfortable you get and how many conversations, and even as you're building very good rapport with these people you'll be working with, it's still an interview. So you're always being a good listener, which you always should be in your profession, but in interviewing especially. And be a good listener, answer the question, and don't get too comfortable because you're still interviewing till the very end. It's, in pre-COVID, it would have been going out for lunch and getting a little too comfortable in your posture or your speech. Right now, it's mostly by Zoom, but every piece of your follow-up should always be professional.
Yeah, definitely telling them about you every step of the way, right? They're getting to see a window into who you are through every phase. So you want that to be best foot forward, I would imagine. So
Absolutely.
What about, I guess, in terms of connecting with you before we kind of head into some questions, because we have about 15 minutes left in our time. What's kind of the way that they connect with you and your organization? I posted your LinkedIn account and also the website in our chat area. Kind of what's your recommendation to kind of get started if they want to work more closely?
So first step is to connect with me on LinkedIn. So it's an easy way to communicate. I'm happy to speak with you individually for specific career questions. You'll also see on my LinkedIn, I post a number of jobs, not all of them because we're so busy, we can't post everything that we have. You can also register on the NDT website. And what that means is you can specify the types of opportunities you're interested in. And then as those are posted, you'll receive them directly. And then you can feel free to email me directly at rk@ndt.com.
All right, and just put that in the chat as well. Great. One of the questions that have come up is just, do you work with electrical engineers? Is that an area that you assist with? And if so, are you seeing any kind of trends in hiring in that space?
We do work with electrical engineers, and those roles are very varied. We're working with a client right now that is involved in chip development. We have another company that I'm just thinking, it's not what we work on most often, but when we do, we're happy to have electrical engineering talent in our mind. So it's good for me to know of you, and I can tell you the types of companies, happy to speak to you individually about types of opportunities that we either have now or we may have.
And I guess in terms of that, breaking into robotics, have you seen anything in terms of kind of common pathways for people who want to break into that space? Mostly internships or different fellowships or research. Have you seen kind of ways to best break into that space?
Yeah, I would say the internships.
Mm-hmm.
The companies in Boston, interesting because there are some robotics programs for undergrads that I believe a lot of the companies would rather see your specific academic training more depth to the training rather than a quick program in robotics, for example. So again, Tufts students have that advantage of the breadth and depth of exposure in school, if that was an area of specialty of study. And then the internship. If you've had at least one internship, but you haven't been out working yet, that is likely to be almost like the first step or half step that can get you to your next step. And when you think of your career, you should always be thinking of, what am I looking for in my next position? And then once I get that position, what skills do I want to gain that's going to make me valuable for the next role that I have out there? So it's always a strategic mindset that you should have throughout your career. But while you're in school, the internships are invaluable.
One of the questions that just came in, because we touched on the visa topic, right, is about the TN visa for Canada. And I don't know if that lives in that same kind of bucket as like the H1 sponsorship, right, that we were referring to earlier in terms of hiring. I don't know if you can speak to, if the companies that you've worked with are more open to that visa with Canada, since they're a neighbor, friendly neighbor.
Yeah, I can speak to Boston right now. So Boston has loosened up a bit from not having everybody in the office, and a number of companies have told us that people can work fully remotely, but they still prefer, so if you're Canadian, that you're not working remotely from Canada, one. So if you're a student here and then you're going back to Canada, because things will come up where they'd like you to come in the office. As far as the visa, what is best and what I try to do is make it easy for the company. So research it on your own, see what your individual situation is, and then be able to provide that to me or the company to make it easy for them. There's nothing against it. They just don't want to bang up against a wall because they're going to have a challenge, or they may have had an experience where it didn't work out. So if you can provide, all I need the company to do for me is transfer over some paperwork or whatever the case, they're fine typically. But a lot of these tech companies, think of companies at 20 to 200 people, they don't have an inside legal department. So they have to go externally to get legal counsel. So the best thing you can do for yourself is research that on your own and have that information ready.
That's some great advice. Another question that came in is, a company that you're interested in, doesn't have an internship, posted, or might mention student programs on their website, but doesn't have a lot of information available. Do you have any advice there in terms of kind of what a student should do to, explore an opportunity where there may not be one that's so explicitly listed?
So I think with smaller companies, they don't even realize what a big help you could be and how much you can. They can learn from you and you learn from them. So you may have to, if you knew someone that worked there, get a sense of a project that you could offer to take off somebody's hands. And believe me, people are thrilled, especially with an exceptional intern, to have you get to a project that they're not able to. And offer that value. So you may have to be a little bit more proactive and offer your service rather than advertising and knowing exactly what they need.
Yeah. And I would add to that, as far as the Career Center is concerned, I would say you could work with a Career Center advisor to talk through, what it is you're looking for, maybe even a pitch that you could make to an HR person that's on LinkedIn. And I know that we have a lot of resources on our page actually that talks to employers about how to set up an internship program. So myself and employer relations and our team also work with employers really closely on how to set one up and to provide guidance there. So I think, being resourceful, as Risa mentioned, but also just kind of leveraging some of the insights from the Career Center and reaching out proactively with a professional email on LinkedIn as kind of a starting place is always a great point of reference. So if you're looking for an internship opportunity, I always say if there isn't one there, there's always an opportunity to explore that. So, and I think small companies are looking for extra hands. So I think being proactive never hurts.
And utilize your Tufts network. So I'd be happy, anybody that reaches out to me, I would never not set aside time to speak and listen and help. And then you never know where that will lead. It may be an opportunity at that company or through someone else that you're referred to.
Yeah, and the Tufts Herd, which is a great place for alumni student networking, and people are in different fields and they're there to help mentor and answer questions. I think that's another great resource that's available to you through Tufts. That's free, and alums are really interested in speaking with you. So any other questions that folks have, then you can certainly ask them directly or through the chat, however you'd like to ask. Any other kind of questions? If not, I can think of at least one. I was going to ask about cover letters, what you're seeing as trends there, and if there's anything you'd mention about resumes too that you're seeing as trends that have evolved just because of more remote work, less addresses, on resumes now, because you can work from anywhere, right? That removes bias of location. So anything that you would say you've seen as terms of trends there?
That's a really good question. So I've been recruiting for 20 years. This year, starting in the spring, I was asked to assist people as a consultant with their resume. So I've worked on about 35 plus consults. And what comes up is you need to get across your message very swiftly. I'm happy to speak to people about that. Hiring managers are looking for very specific things. So one, there's the hiring manager, and there's also tracking system, applicant tracking systems at companies. Some are looking for keywords, so you have to have that on your resume. But as far as marketing yourself, for example, this is what we do, all day, every day. So I have a very good sense of what a hiring manager is looking for. Some of the key things are the technologies you're working with. You want to have those at the top of your resume. If you're a new grad, your resume isn't pages long, and they will look and see Tufts if it's at, that could be at the top or the bottom, but definitely your skill set needs to be at the top. If you've had experience, the majority of clients that we have in the Boston area have some type of B2B, so business to business, software as a service offering. So companies seem to be more partial to that than the actual vertical, whether it be financial services, healthcare, ed tech, B2B software as a service. If you've worked at a company, as an internship or work experience, that's very much interesting to them. If you're targeting a e-commerce company, you want to put that at the top, that if you've had B2C e-commerce experience. The other experience that's asked for now is B2B2C. So we have technology companies that are selling and offering to pharmaceutical companies that are ultimately targeting patients. So it's a business selling to a business that's ultimately targeting a patient. So that's valuable. As far as skill sets, if you have any types of certifications, that's something you may want to put at the top, whether it be Scrum certified, project management certifications. I tend to have people put at the top of their resume certain bullet points of, if they've worked within a tech company, who have you collaborated with? Have you collaborated with engineering, UX design, sales, marketing, services? What size company have you worked for? And that's something you want to list. When you list the name of a company, you want to not have the reader have to figure that out. So if it's the Sunshine Company, underneath that, I would offer B2B software as a service company, software as a service financial services offering to global banks. So it's very clear the type of company and the type of industry you've worked in and the type of people, customers you've targeted. So those are valuable pieces on your resume.
Another question came in about someone's in the process of getting their master's and transitioning to a different career, so something different than they were doing. You know, how do you suggest kind of leveraging that, or not at all, right? Coming from one career and going into another, you know, through a different master's degree, getting a different specific background to leverage into that next thing.
So the beauty of Tufts is that you have access to a tremendous network, whether it be the Career Center, whether it be alum, or just, you know, what your access to your professors, and any internship that you can get, any knowledge that you can get through talking to people. I loved my time at Tufts because there's something about being a student. You have that ability to call people and have these conversations. When you're out in the work world, you don't as often have the ability to maybe come, you know, it's a hard time now, but come in and observe or offer to assist. But I think there's a lot of advantage to the time we're in right now, and that people seem, I wouldn't say we're at a slower pace, but people seem to have some time, they're not commuting. And I would, again, any experience, exposure, internship projects that you can work on will make it easier for you to market yourself on your resume and then in an interview.
And any kind of final words of wisdom to our, you know, soon to be graduates, whether they're undergrads or grads, you know, what kind of parting words of hope as they kind of venture into this job search market, which can seem overwhelming at times?
So I would say keep a record of what you're doing so you can know when you connected with a company, how you're following up on a weekly basis. So it's good to be organized in your process. It's a wonderful time to be in tech. I know the news, you know, when you're watching TV, the news isn't always so uplifting these days. Tech is really thriving, and all types of new ideas and companies are being formed. So I would say it's actually a pretty good job market. So I'm happy to be a resource if you ever want to run anything by me, if you're working on something on your own and you want to talk about salary. The one piece I didn't cover today is remember that you're building your career, and who you are as a person and a professional carries with you throughout your entire life. Be mindful of how you treat people and how you'd like people, obviously, to treat you. And if you accept an offer, and I've seen people this year renege on an offer and accept a counter offer, you've burnt the bridge. And in your career, that always comes back to bite you. I've never seen it work out. So your reputation and just who you are as a person is who you are, and is who people will see you as throughout your lifetime. So I recommend that you be very thoughtful and mindful of everything that you do.
Some really great advice and great parting words for our students and alumni. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and all your insights and wisdom around the tech industry. I know it was really helpful. We had such a great group of students that joined us for the entire time, which is amazing. And like I said, we'll be sharing the recording of the session on our YouTube channel. So if you came in late or missed any part of it, we'll have that up usually within a week or so. And the Career Center has started sending out their e-newsletters, and we send out lots of information about future workshops with us. So please sign up for our e-news and set up a time with one of our career advisors to start working on your opportunities and exploring internships and how to get out there and take advantage of Handshake and other resources that we offer. So thanks again for everyone joining us this Friday. I hope you have a great weekend. And Risa, thanks again for joining us for this workshop.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Have a great day. Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.